welcome to another video.
If you've come here for politics, guys, I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. This video is not about politics. It's about the difference between living in China and living in America. For those of you who have seen any of my videos before, you'll know that I've been living here in mainland China for over 10 years. In fact, it turns out I'm the first guy to ever make vlogs out of mainland China on YouTube. I've just gotten back from a trip to America and I really enjoyed myself. A good friend of mine showed me around. I went all over the place. I went to, Los Angeles, went to Las Vegas, went into Arizona, went down to Tombstone, and I've seen quite a lot of what America has to offer, at least on the west and southwestern areas of America anyway. Now I know some people might get upset that I say America and not the USA or North America, but hey, I've grown up my whole life knowing the USA as America, so I'm just going to refer to it as America. If that upsets you, sorry, I'm just going to have to deal with it. I have to deal with drinking Chinese beer, so I think it's fair. Right, so let's talk about the differences between China and America. The first one I'm going to talk about, probably one of the biggest ones, is food. I couldn't believe the portions when I went to America. You know, it was my first time to America. I've been to England and the UK and little bits of Europe here and there, and of course Africa and China and India and Thailand and Taiwan and various other places around, Japan, various other places around Asia. It's the first time in my life I've been somewhere where the portions of food are so massive. Now, it's a good and it's a bad thing. I mean, I absolutely love the value for money you get. When you order anything in America, it comes with heaps of other stuff. It's always huge. And the upside is I didn't have a single bad meal while I was in America. Every single thing that I had to eat in America was delicious. Absolutely amazing, tasted great, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, while you can still get big portions of food here in China, the way people eat here in China is very different to the way people eat in the West and America, and that is people share food. So you'll be sitting at a table and there'll be a big plate of meats and then a big plate of vegetables and a big plate of rice or noodles, etc. And people share. So you kind of just take from whichever dish you want until you get full and then you stop eating. But in America and other Western countries, you get your own plate, and that's your plate, and you're kind of obliged to finish your own plate. So the fact that you're getting these massive portions, and you kind of end up eating the whole thing, first of all because it's so delicious, but second of all because it's yours, it's there, it's in front of you. I can see why there's a big sort of weight problem in America. And before I talk about the whole weight issue, let's talk about some of the actual differences in the food itself. Here in China, people like to eat rice, like to eat noodles, lots of vegetables, and food isn't very processed. In fact, it's very common for people to go to the local wet markets in the morning, buy their vegetables fresh, go and cook them for that day. And the food you'll find is usually quite simple. Chopped up vegetables, chopped up meat, kind of thrown into a wok and fried with, then added to some steamed rice. And that's pretty much it. Of course, you do get some more complicated dishes up all around the country. It's a very diverse country and the food is very diverse. But in essence, most of the food is very simple and it's at its core elements. Whereas in America, you find everything's very processed. You've got all these weird and wonderful sauces and ways of preparing the meat, and what you get on your plate is a masterpiece of engineering and years of scientific research, whereas here it's basically chop it up, cook it, eat it. That being said, the food quality in China is very suspect, and although it seems healthier at first, when you find out where the vegetables are grown and how the meat is raised, actually the food can be quite toxic, and there are a lot of food scandals here. So in essence, it's much healthier here in China, the food, but in practice it often ends up being less healthy than in countries like America, where you've got health standards and sort of repercussions for having bad hygiene in your restaurant, for instance. Let's talk about the whole weight thing. I'm not going to lie, I was fairly shocked when I got to America because it's the first time in my life I've seen so many obese people. And I've been to a fair many places around the world, and this is the first time wherever I looked there was somebody who was seriously overweight. And I guess it's just the norm. And I'm not trying to judge here, and in fact I can't blame you because the food there is so delicious and so cheap. I mean, you get sort of $3 deals, 2 slices of pizza and a super sip or super gulp or whatever they call it. Who can resist? The food's so good, it's so cheap. If I was living in America, I promise you right now, I'd weigh 3 times what I weigh now just because of the delicious and readily available cheap food everywhere. And that's no lie. However, you can immediately see the kind of repercussions that it has, because when you watch TV in America, pretty much I'd say 2/3 of all the adverts on TV are for medical products to help cure sort of all these little diseases and ailments that come along with being so heavily overweight. So, America, I'm just going to say it now, no big judgments there, I understand it, but should probably do something about your weight issue, because it was a bit of a shocker to me to see so many people so overweight. Now you see, the difference is over here in China is that everybody walks everywhere. First of all, it's a lot cheaper. Second of all, it's very convenient. The way neighborhoods and cities are set up, you have access to just about everything you need within walking distance. So you'll have supermarkets, wet markets, restaurants, places of work, etc. You'll have like subway stations or bus stations nearby. So you kind of end up walking a lot. And every day, I've got a little walking app thing, tracks how many steps you take every day. On average, I walk about 10,000 steps just doing my regular things here in China. And that definitely keeps the weight down. Whereas in America, well, your roads are good, your traffic isn't chaos like it is here, because right here in China the traffic is atrocious. People don't know how to drive, cars are new to everybody here, people do not obey the traffic laws, and so it's a mess. So, driving here is first of all chaotic and very frustrating, but second of all just not convenient, and also very expensive because you don't get free parking anywhere. Like in America, a lot of the malls, you can go park outside for free. You can park at your house for free. You can't do that here. You have to pay for parking at your own house. You have to pay for parking in the malls. So that's a huge difference. And that's also why people just drive everywhere. And that also kind of contributes to the whole overweight thing. Let's talk about cost of living for a minute here. This beer cost me 5 RMB at this is kind of like an outdoor restaurant. It's not really a restaurant. And if I go to the supermarket, it will cost me 4.8 RMB. So the guy's not really even making a profit on this. If I wanted to have food at this restaurant, which I probably am not going to because, it's a really dingy, dirty little place, to be honest. And I love eating from places like this, but I'm trying to cut down. I'm trying to get healthier. If I were to eat here, my whole meal and my beer and everything would be less than 20 RMB, which is, I'll put up the US dollar amount here. It's not a lot. Food is incredibly cheap here in China, but on the flip side, I found that food was also incredibly cheap in America. The difference is, in America, you have to pay tips, whereas here in China, you don't pay any tips. In fact, if you try to tip them, they'll think you're probably trying to bribe them or get some kind of guanxi, so they will usually refuse a tip. So, food, I'd say, although cheap in America, is cheaper here in China, for sure. However, the quality of the food that you get in America is way better. I mean, way better. Just the choice, the flavors, that kind of thing, for my own personal taste anyway. I know a lot of people will argue with me because China does have, and I'm not going to lie, does have a vast array and an amazing amount of different kinds of foods and tastes too. But the thing is, you know for sure that the food that you're eating in America is safe. And if it's not safe, somebody's going to get into a lot of trouble. Whereas if I eat something here and I get kind of sick or a little bit of food poisoning or an upset stomach, that guy wouldn't care. And if I went to the police or something, they wouldn't care either unless I was dead. So, they can get away with being as unhealthy as they want to, really. So, food, much of a muchness. Let's move on to rent. Now, rent depends on the city you want to live in. If you want to live in a first-tier city like Shenzhen here, or Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, or any of the bigger cities in China, you are going to pay a very high rent. In fact, it's very comparable to the kind of rent you'd be paying in America. For instance, a single-bedroom apartment somewhere in this area will cost you about 4,000 RMB a month. A two-bedroom apartment, upwards of 6,000 plus. And if you want a really big, nice apartment, you know, sort of Western-sized apartment, you're going to be paying more than 10,000 RMB a month. However, if you want to go to a smaller third-tier city, fourth-tier city, you can get a massive, big sort of four-bedroom apartment for about 1,500 a month. So it really depends on where you want to live. Now, just out of interest, when I was in Arizona, passing through Phoenix and Tucson, I took a look at the rentals over there just to see how much people pay. And I was shocked to discover that you could actually rent a big house with a swimming pool for about 1,000 to 1,500 US dollars a month, which is actually quite crazy in my mind, because that kind of price here, you could get a fancy apartment in a nice city, but you couldn't get a whole house with its swimming pool and everything, unless you're out in the rural sticks somewhere. And that sort of thing's not really accessible to a foreigner who comes to rent here. So rent really just depends on where you want to live, but it can be quite high. Anyway, that's rent. Let's talk about real estate. Here in China, real estate is incredibly expensive, and it's ludicrous because you will buy an apartment, say, you know, a little box in the sky, because you don't own the land. In fact, you don't own the apartment anyway. I'll explain in a minute. But you'll buy yourself a little box in the sky for a couple of million RMB these days in a city like Shenzhen or Shanghai or Beijing. Really expensive. And it's only a 70-year lease. You're only leasing it from the government. It doesn't actually belong to you. And the buildings that these apartments are in, well, they don't actually even last 70 years. They usually last about 50 years before they need to be knocked down and rebuilt. So it's kind of a ludicrous situation over here where property is concerned. Whereas I saw in America, $200,000, you can buy a reasonably okay little house somewhere, you know, and it's yours and the land belongs to you, and that's that. So property way better in America than here in China, for sure, 100%. And the fact that you can actually own it in America. May as well talk about transport as well. That's something that's really cheap here. Public transport is incredibly cheap. Petrol, or gasoline as you call it in America, is actually quite a lot more expensive over here than it is in America. I was kind of surprised to find out. But over here, it's about 7 RMB for a liter. I'll put the conversion here, how much per gallon or whatever. But it is way cheaper in America, I remember that. Next thing I want to talk about is safety. Now, before I went to America, a lot of my subscribers were leaving comments like, oh no, you better watch out because, you know, in America they've got guns and there's all this gun violence and it's such a dangerous place, etc., etc. Let me just let you guys in on a little secret. I come from South Africa. My country trumps your country when it comes to violence. If you ever wanted to have a pissing contest to see whose country has better crime or more crime, my country will win every single time. So I'm used to violence and violent crime and all this kind of nonsense because it's just part of everyday life in South Africa. It's kind of like trying to explain to a dairy farmer what milk tastes like. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I found America incredibly safe. I mean, seriously, as long as you know which areas not to go into and as long as you know how to, you know, judge or, you know, feel a room and judge the situation, you'll be fine. I mean, Venice Beach, for instance, yeah, there are a couple of strung-out druggies hanging around. You get a couple of homeless people here and there. But you know what? They all seem to be dealing with their own stuff. They don't really seem to be trying to go out there and attack you. And you just keep an eye on these kind of people and, you know, you'll be fine. So from my own perspective, I think America is an incredibly safe place. I wasn't once no one tried to hijack me. I wasn't shot at, you know, I had no problems. Now, yes, there are gun crimes in America, and, you know, there was that big Orlando shooting actually just before I went. But you know what? These kind of things happen, and it's an absolute tragedy. But here in China, we don't have mass shootings, we have mass stabbings, and, you know, it's quite common actually. It doesn't get as much news coverage because that's how China works. They kind of block anything sensitive or anything that makes China look bad gets blocked. So you won't see big headline news around the world about a crazy guy breaking into a kindergarten and stabbing like 20 children to death. But this happens fairly often. And it happens often enough that you kind of get desensitized to it. In fact, stabbings happen all the time in China. Mass stabbings in public places, stabbings in kindergartens. For some reason, that seems to always happen. And that's why you'll always see not armed, but these kind of security guys with these long poles standing outside of kindergartens and high schools and middle schools. You know, they've got a big Y in it, and that's to stop these stabbing crazy guys from killing children, because for some reason they always go for the kids. So yeah, there's a lot of violence, and there are a lot of murders and things happening here in China. The difference is, you as a foreigner won't be affected. Being a foreigner living in China is incredibly safe. It's very rare that somebody will attack a foreigner here. They'll scam you, they'll try to cheat you, but they won't actually physically try to attack you, unless of course you attack them first or provoke that nationalist pride, which I've warned people about before. So I'd say, as a foreigner living in China, yes, it's safer than living in a place like America overall. But China is not overall a safer place than America, because it has just as much violent crime and murders and things like that, if not more. It's just not as widely reported as America. The final thing I'd just like to say before I wrap this video up is the diversity. I was kind of blown away by the diversity in America, and by that I mean you walk around and you see people all dressed up in different ways and different styles, many different races all together. You have the whole subculture thing. You see sort of goths over here, and you'll see sort of country and western style people here, and you'll cowboys and what have you. And I was, you know, skaters, surfers, all that kind of thing. And it was really refreshing to see such a big amount of diversity when it comes to people's personalities. Because here in China, unfortunately, it's a very sort of homogeneous, very monocultural sort of setup. And yes, there are something like 52 different ethnic minorities here in China, but at the core, they're all more or less the same. When you go and meet them and talk to them, they sort of follow the same routines, have very similar traditions, and almost an identical outlook on life. So it kind of gets a little, how could we say, boring after a while living here, because it doesn't matter who you meet, they've all got the same sort of questions for you. They all have the same sort of outlook on life. So it takes away some of the fun of life and the diversity. So America really kind of impressed me with that, and I really enjoyed that part of being there. That's it, guys. I hope you found this informative, and for those of you who are still maybe deciding where you prefer to live or where you'd like to visit, etc., I hope this has been helpful. That's really it for this one, guys. I look forward to seeing you in my next video, and until then, as always, stay awesome.